Good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We've reached the end of another working week and a busy weekend coming up here on the channel. We're going to be looking at the tropics. We've got three areas of interest that we are going to be discussing in quite a bit of detail. We've got other aspects going on globally as well. That will be looked at. We'll look at the latest with regards to developing La Nina. And then on Sunday, we've got the all-important live stream, 4 p.m. As always. We're going to look at the extreme rainfall event in Spain, Typhoon Kong-Rey that slammed into Taiwan, strongest or largest since 1996, I believe, for this part of the world. So yeah, another busy weekend coming up here on Marv Vogan Weather on YouTube. If you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. It would let me know that you're enjoying the content here on the channel. It drives me forward to produce more content here on the channel. But a very quick look back at the month of October. Then we'll look at the November outlook that was released last night as well. So lots going on here. And obviously this is now the all-important month. We've reached the month of November and the winter forecast will get released in a few weeks' time. And I'm excited to bring you that forecast coming up. So kind of finalising some of the ideas with regards to the winter season. And that will be getting discussed over the next few weeks also. So the live stream is also going to look back at a little bit about October. Some of the further thoughts with regards to November. But in today's video, I want to specialise on November and what we could expect to see. Now, the month of October has turned out to be fairly close to average. It's been warmer than average and I believe slightly drier than average overall, with always that kind of regional variability. But this is a publication from the Met Office issued today, and this is how the stats are kind of looking. So we'll just very, very briefly look over these. And the month of October has turned out to be warmer than average across all areas pretty much of the UK. This article states that after a mostly cool first half of the month of October, obviously with a very negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation. Now, back in my October outlook, I did say that I thought it was going to be a colder and wetter than average October. That has turned out to not be the case. So, as always, I do hold my hand up if things have turned out incorrect. But certainly through the first half of the month, it was considerably cooler. And then it turned warmer, but also drier. We've got a very strong area of high pressure now anchored over Western Europe. And we'll look at that in just a second. But generally speaking, it was 0.7 above the 91 to 2020 average. All nations of the UK were considerably warmer than average, ranging from 0.6 in Wales to 0.9 in Northern Ireland. Not one county across the UK was below average for the mean during the month of October. Quite interesting. In terms of rainfall, we had a drier than average across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and close to average, I suppose, for England. Some areas were actually slightly wet than average, other areas drier than average. So in terms of rainfall, it says here that the rainfall distribution through the month has been much more varied across the UK, with much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and large parts of Wales having a below average month. Most of England was around average for the monthly rainfall. So areas drier than average, other areas was wetter than average. Though pockets higher totals were seen in parts of South, West Midlands and far northeast. Overall, the UK saw 84% of the long-term average. For England, just above average at around 101%, 91.3 millimetres averaged out. Wales was 80% and Scotland was 72%, Northern Ireland 71%. So this kind of drier theme, especially across the northern areas of the UK that we've seen in recent months, has continued. We did see a fairly wet August across particularly Western Scotland. Then that turned around during the month of September. It looks as if that dry theme continues on into the month of October. And based on some of the parameters in terms of the month of November, November could actually turn out to be warmer and drier as well. Hint, hint. But you can see here in terms of sunshine distribution, it has been a mixed bag in terms of sunshine. With rainfall, there was some regional variability in the sunshine hours compared to average for October, while Northern Ireland and Wales October sunshine hours were average. Scotland saw less sunshine in the west than in the east compared to average, and England saw more sunshine in the north than the south compared to average. Overall, the UK saw 97% of normal sunshine hours. So the notables was Storm Ashley, first named storm of the 24-25 season, brought wet and windy conditions to the UK between 20th and 21st of October, with the strongest winds across northwestern areas. So the system obviously rapidly deepened from a 988 to 952 millibar area of low pressure within, I believe, a 24-hour period. So well within rapid cyclogenesis criteria. Strongest winds, incidentally, was 82 miles per hour Aberdaron, 81 at Culloden, County Down, and 76 in Inverbervie on the Aberdeenshire coast. We had wind gusts well in excess of 100 miles an hour over the Cairngorm summits. So, a couple of wind records as well to speak about. We had a 78 mile per hour gust, I believe, at Tyree. That was the strongest wind gust on record for the month of October, and I believe the strongest wind gust since 2016, if I'm right in saying. And we also saw a very warm end to the month. In fact, 17.5 Celsius recorded at Aberdeen was in fact the warmest Halloween since, I believe, 2015 for Scotland. The warmest being 2011, where we had a temperature just shy of 20 Celsius. But what a difference we've got now compared to what we had late last night. So if we skip back through this meteoseal animation here, you can see the temperatures later last night with the presence of very strong westerly winds, may I add. We had temperatures of 16 Celsius both at Tain and also at Aberdeen Dice Airport. So the 17.5 recorded at Dice during yesterday afternoon, Scotland's warmest Halloween since 2015. Interesting enough, we've came off the back of the coldest summer since 2015 for the UK as a whole. And I believe there was temperatures around 18, 19 Celsius down in Devon during the second half of yesterday as well. So it was a mild end to the month. And if we play through this animation, there is colder air digging in from the south. We obviously had mild temperatures across the board yesterday, but up across Scotland, 17.5, quite notable for the final day of the month. But notice here, we'll play through the loop. You can see here that the temperatures have gradually cooled. And while we had 16 at the 1600 UTC yesterday, we've only got 7s and 8s at the same time 24 hours later. So this cold front is moving south with some considerably colder air on the backside, still holding on to milder conditions the further south you go over the UK as well as Ireland. So let's crack on. Like I said, the tropics are starting to become more active. The MJO is moving into the West Atlantic Basin. So therefore, we are needing to keep our eyes on 3 areas of interest. That will be getting discussed in detail in tomorrow's tropical outlook. So I hope you can stay tuned for that. But let's get to the November ideas. This is the reason why today's video is on. So it has been released on markvoganweather.com. There is going to be a link in the description below today's video. And look at this terrific photograph captured by Shryan Brown, based in Dublin, Ireland. This was during Storm Ashley back on the 20th into the 21st of October. So credit to Shryan, and thanks for letting me share his terrific image as the cover picture for the November forecast. So anyway, October, this was actually before the stats came out, but October will go down as a warmer than average month for the UK, Ireland and Europe as a whole, likely near average rainfall for the usual unusual regional variability. For Europe, considerably drier than average, while others record-breaking wet. And we know the scenes that have come out of the Valencia area of eastern Spain in recent days. Devastating scenes at that, due to record-breaking flooding. We've seen upwards of a year's worth of rainfall within an 8-hour period. and we are going to discuss that in the live stream coming up at 4 o'clock this Sunday afternoon. So I hope you're available for that. You can tune in, you can drop a comment, give you a shout out. I'll answer any questions if I can. So always enjoy the live streams every Sunday afternoon. It's become a regular feature here on the channel as well. 7 days a week content here. And we look at not just regional weather, but the global weather and all the global teleconnections that go into driving our weather pattern. So this is the month of October, seen by the CDAS data. Let's blow this up just a little fraction here, so hopefully you can see better. But we'll get into a little bit slightly with regards to what I expect to see happen during the month of November. But I want to look back at a little bit of a relationship between the Madden-Julian Oscillation, the various phases, and the connection with the Arctic Oscillation. But before I continue, in case you want to know just simply, you don't want to know the technical stuff, you don't want to know the ins and outs and thereabouts, and you just want to know essentially what November is going to do, I'll quickly summarize the verdict. Basically, I guess I'm going to go for a mild with dry first half and a wetter second half, but mild and dry overall for the UK and Ireland is what I expect to see during the month of November. Colder than average for the far east and southeast of Europe. Potential for a couple of named storms also. So before we get into the technical stuff, I wanted to kind of summarize that I think we have got a milder and drier than average November likely for the UK and Ireland here. But I want to go back a little bit because I always like to kind of explain and discuss how we've seen the type of pattern that we've experienced over the last several weeks. And I want to address this couple of things here. It's been a month with big swings in the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation. The first 10 days were cold with significant negative indices, while the final 10 days warm and extremely positive in terms of the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation. The various cold to warm phases of the MJO have nicely matched up with the AO and the NAO. You can look at this article at your leisure in a bit more detail, and it'll be easier for you to actually see some of these images as well. But generally speaking, this is where we've seen the MJO going and the response with the Arctic Oscillation. So obviously the positive Arctic Oscillation is when all the cold air is bundled up within the high latitudes, up within the Arctic. It then generates a more zonal westerly jet stream, and higher pressure within the mid-latitude pattern tends to be milder overall. It can be a mixture of mild and dry, but also mild and stormy. We've seen a bit of both in recent times, but you can see here, if you look at this chart that I made up several days ago, back in July we had the null phase, so a very inactive MJO, less response to the atmosphere. Then we rotated through phases 4 into 5, into phases 3, 4 and 5. Where are that? That is when the MJO pulls that enhanced convection, moving through the Indian Ocean and into the Indonesia region. That then responded to a more positive Arctic Oscillation, which meant the stronger influence of westerly flow, milder conditions generally, and all the cold. Obviously, it was still early in the season during the month of August, but this was generally when we had a lot of mild conditions within the mid-latitude pattern. Then the MJO continued to move out of the Indian Ocean into the Pacific. We went through phases 7 to 1, and we've seen the Arctic Oscillation during the second half of September in particular, going from positive to negative. We've seen 2 lobes of Arctic air that get descended into Europe initially, then into North America. The Arctic Oscillation was firmly negative actually at this stage, allowing cold air from the Arctic down into the mid-latitudes. That then, MJO, moved from the Pacific into the Atlantic and then back into the Indian Ocean. We've seen phases 3, 4 and 5 repeat. You can see here that we went back into positive territory during the second half of this month. So we started off October negative and colder than average. Then we went into positive territory, milder than average. And the reasons why is because the MJO moved out of the Pacific and the Atlantic and back into the Indian Ocean, tends to lead to a more positive, both in the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. And it's expected to go back towards the negative, or neutral to slightly negative, as we move into the month of November. So that's another thing that I'm going to discuss in just a second here with regards to the possibility of still something colder later in the month here, even though the models are all hinting at mild, generally speaking. So overall, it's been a pretty blocky September and October. What is November going to generate? That's going to be the question. Thanks to Richard Trott for sending me this geopotential height anomaly chart from the 1st of September through the 26th of October. And you can see here lots of blocking, especially over the Baffin Straits. It's a west-based negative North Atlantic Oscillation, if you notice here. Strong blocking over Western Russia, if you notice here. And we've got a negative just to the south of the UK and Ireland. And obviously, this kind of orientation of the ridges and troughs, south displaced jet, lots of blocking over the top, has led to a south displaced jet, but also wetter conditions more for England and Wales, drier conditions across Scotland and Northern Ireland. That explains a little bit why it has been so wet across England and Wales as opposed to the further north you go. But over the last 60 days, the UK is generally close to average. Mainland Europe, largely warmer than average, with exceptions of Western France. And most of Iberia has actually been average to slightly below average in terms of the temperature profile for the last couple of months. These are some of the highlights that have taken place in terms of extremes. We'll skip through that. You can look at that at your leisure. Let's get into the month of November. Mild, dry theme to end the month of October, with high pressure dominating, likely to continue through at least the first half of November. So with high pressure firmly established over Europe to end the month of October, I'm confident this setup holds firm through at least the first 10 days of the month, perhaps longer. This, I believe, is a legacy of a strengthening phase 5 into 6 of the MJO. Where we are now is strikingly similar. So the pattern that we've got at the moment, strikingly similar to early and mid-September in both the 500 millibar pattern and the MJO position, as well as its amplitude. So strong block and high pressure with trapped cut-off lows underneath has led to the extreme Central Europe flooding. So this was back in September. Remember the record-breaking rainfall across Austria and adjacent countries. Poland, very, very hard hit by those floods back in September. And look at what's happened over recent weeks, not only in southeastern France, where we had 800 millimetres of rain falling in the space of 48 hours, but now the Valencia area of eastern Spain, a year's worth of rain falling in 8 hours. And this has been occurring on a repeat cycle. We've seen this situation before. High pressure over central and northern Europe. Cut-off areas of low pressure were splitting the jet as it's coming across the Atlantic. One branch going north up towards Scandinavia. Another branch undercutting into the south of Europe, into a warmer, more moist environment overall. You drive colder in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere over top of a warmer environment, the Mediterranean basin, into the 20s in terms of the water temperature. Ample fuel for explosive thunderstorm production. And that's exactly what happened both during mid-September when we had Arctic air getting driven south, and also now we don't so much have the Arctic air getting driven south this time around. But the overall synoptic pattern is extremely similar to what we've seen back around a month ago. So while the core of the high pressure, we've got high pressure in control at the moment, and while that is going to linger through the next couple of weeks, it's going to wax and wane. It's going to shift position. Where it positions itself will determine amounts of sunshine and what kind of temperature we can expect as well. We've got quite a cloudy, stagnant air mass at the moment. That's because a lot of moisture trapped underneath that area of high pressure can't really go anywhere, so it gets stuck. Leaden skies, fog and mist during the overnight period, struggling to break up during the course of the day with a lack of wind. But if we start to get winds more out of a kind of southeasterly direction as the high shifts to the east, that means we could start to clean the atmosphere out somewhat and see more in the way of sunshine. But generally, this is the upcoming 7 days of the CFSV2. Firmly drier than average. Notice here, next 7 days, we've still got above average rainfall expected across eastern Iberia. So the position will be key. The position of the high will be key to average, above average, or below average temperatures. Interestingly enough, to see how the CFSV2 holds the atmosphere's strongest block and high pretty much globally. This is the strongest, most anomalous high anywhere within at least the northern hemisphere, possibly the world at the moment here. But it's pretty much bang slap over Western Europe, and it's expected to linger through mid-November. Then it retreats south with low pressure returning to Iceland week 3 and 4. So this is week 1 of the CFSV2. Very strong high pressure over the majority of Western Europe. Day 8 through 14, which takes out to the 14th. High pressure dominating. You notice it's positioned further north. So we've got this weakness underneath. Always a threat of extreme rainfall events, especially with the warm Mediterranean waters. But notice here the CFSV2 week 3, 14th through the 21st of November. We'll start to see higher pressure going back towards Iberia, with good news for this part of the world. But notice here we're starting to lower the heights up towards Iceland. So that's quite interesting, actually. We'll look at the MJO in a second. We'll also look at the stratosphere. But you can see here, even into the following week, 21st through the 20th of November, high pressure. That's a very phase 4-5 of the MJO. Milder and a positive Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation. This suggests a mild and likely dry November overall, with no amplified phase 7, 8, and 1 MJO response. Remember, the colder phases of the MJO is 7, 8, and 1, and the modelling is really not seeing any potential cold at all. That high over Western Europe appears to not want to budge. Even though we've got changes taking place, Pacific, North America, into the Atlantic even, that high over us, over the UK, over Ireland, doesn't appear to want to shift, which is rather interesting. Quite odd, actually, if I'm being honest. So the ECM, I suspect, will head back through phases 2 and 3. That's the Indian Ocean. Then into phases 4 and 5, that's the Indonesia region. Through the next 20 days, perhaps a mild, dry first half and a more unsettled and possibly stormy, at times, second half to the month. So we're going through the phases of 7, 8, and 1 at the moment. Look at this here, day 1 through 5. So the reds is now, and day 5, the pink colours is, we're going into phases 8. This would scream out a negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation pattern, but the modeling's refusing to go negative, which is quite interesting, actually. But there's other things clearly at work to stop this pattern from properly evolving. Look at this here. This is the Arctic oscillation. Phase 7, 8, you would expect a negative Arctic oscillation and negative North Atlantic oscillation pattern. But look at this. It stops at the neutral line and goes back positive again. But there is a clear rotation back towards the Indian Ocean, which can lead to a stormier pattern for western areas of Europe. So that's something that we need to take into consideration going forward as well. But it's really suspicious how it's skipping through the cold phases without delivering any cold pattern, and also the fact that we are likely to go back into the mild phases here based on what I'm seeing in terms of the modelling. So this is the next 30 days, Thursday the 31st of October through Saturday the 30th of November. And look at this here. Look at how the high is just anchored over western areas of Europe. Now we've got troughs digging into western North America, boosting the ridge over eastern North America, driving a trough into the West Atlantic, and there's a ridge over Western Europe. We've got the amplified pattern, but it's not behaving quite like you would expect it to. So this is the beauty of the weather. There's always variables, always things that perhaps catch you out. And this is certainly somewhat of a head scratcher, if I'm being quite honest with you. So another factor, we've talked about the MJO, we've talked about the reluctance of the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation going negative. What about the stratosphere? And this is kind of probably looking even further down the road, possibly even into the start of the winter season. Another factor screaming out of the mild positive AO-NAO signal later down the road, even into mid-December, is the GFS is suggesting the core of the stratospheric polar vortex will likely cool to a record possible for the time of the year, minus 85 Celsius by the 9th of November. So it looks as if the modelling, this was something I discussed in detail yesterday in the video, the modelling according to GFS is really strengthening the polar vortex within the stratosphere. And if it drops to minus 85 as early as the 9th of November, I think that would be close to record territory for this time of the year. So that's the anomaly within the 10 millibar level, firmly colder than average. This is over the next 7 days, by the way. Then this is the period between the 4th and the 11th. Again, firmly colder than average. The GFS ensemble also sees the lower stratosphere nearest the troposphere losing the positive heights. So in other words, the positive heights within the lower stratosphere would suggest blocking over the Arctic region. So a negative Arctic oscillation. So you notice here that it's the initial, this is showing blockiness over the lower portions of the stratosphere. So this would be in response to what's going on underneath. I know this is quite technical. For some folk, it's probably hard to understand, but other people, hopefully, this is making sense, and you're getting something out of this. But look at this here. So this is the initial. Notice here the blues starting to show up. We've got a generally high pressure dominated field here within the 50 millibar level. But notice here this subtle ribbon of blue showing up in the lower stratosphere. And then, if you notice, we'll skip out to a week from now, and it's suggesting that that blue increases in coverage. Look at this here. So we're starting to see a little low developing in the lower strat by the time we reach a week from now. Still got some blocking, if you notice here, over the North Atlantic, extending into southern Greenland here. But again, there's confliction. GFS ensemble doesn't want to see a negative AO or NAO. Then you notice here it increases even more, even with some blue heights now showing up over the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. But generally speaking, it's indicating to me with the rotation of the MJO back towards the milder phases and the stratosphere cooling within the lower and upper stratosphere, then everything's kind of suggesting that we're going towards a milder theme. I still think that we've got an opportunity for perhaps the high that we've got over the UK, Ireland at the moment, possibly shifting towards Scandinavia or even towards Greenland, some point between the 10th and the 20th of November. I still think there's a reason to believe that we've got a small window, albeit it's probably closing, of something colder during the back half of November. But we'll wait and see. This is another reason to suggest that the stratospheric circulation is going to strengthen. We're cooling it. The models are showing it at 10 millibars. The mean zonal winds, the weaker they are, the weaker the vortex. The stronger they are, the stronger the vortex. ECM sees the mean zonal wind accelerating beyond mid-November, perhaps approaching record levels. And if you notice this here, the thick red line is the climatological average in terms of the strength of the mean zonal winds. We're going from just above to record strong. Then notice this is a very interesting, I'm very curious about this. Why is it seeing the deceleration of the winds at 10 millibars within the stratosphere sometime around mid-November? That, in my opinion, is based on the fact that there is blocking going to develop, and the modelling sees that. It then creates the frictional effect as the building of pressure within the troposphere. It kind of increases the depth of the troposphere within the Arctic region. The troposphere is quite thin over the pole, it's thickest over the equator. And generally, when you build heights within the Arctic troposphere, you're then bulging the troposphere into the stratosphere, and that slows down the stratospheric circulation here. Is the modelling seeing, so it goes from record strong to below average in terms of the wind speed at 10 millibars. So is it seeing blocking some point during mid-November? This is why I think we've got still an opportunity for a colder spell at some point. Then it then accelerates and goes back towards very strong late November into early December. And the reason why I think that is the MJO is going to rotate back into phases 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to reduce the pressure pattern over the Arctic, lose the frictional effect, and then allow the winds to accelerate within the stratosphere. That is my theory and my thinking behind what's taking place. This is the month of November. Again, curiously, the CFSV2 has the high slightly west of the UK and Ireland, which would possibly promote something more northwesterly in terms of wind. But also notice the blocking up into the Arctic region here. So again, it's seeing positive heights into the Arctic, not blues, but positives. So again, there's confliction, there's confusion even within the models. I'm confused by what I'm seeing because I think to myself, do we still have the opportunity, despite the fact that the models aren't showing it, do we still have the possibility of something colder? And no, even if it comes, it's going to disappear and we're going to go back into a mild pattern. November is seen to be a drier than average month, seen by the CFSV2, and then warmer than average. So that's it. I hope it's made sense. It's been reasonably long-winded today. But back again tomorrow with the tropical outlook. Plenty going on within the tropics. And then the live on Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. So I will leave a link in the description for the live stream underneath today's video. So you can bookmark that or whatever you want to do. It'd be good to see you anyway. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow with the next video. Bye for now.